I was trapped in a flood along with my husband's first love, the flight captain. After hesitating for just a moment, he chose to save Meth One, who was pregnant. But when he went back for his beloved Helen, it was already too late. He could only watch as she was swept away by the raging waters. He blamed me for delaying the rescue and causing her death. He hated me for 7 years and never allowed our son to call him Dad. The day the time machine was launched, he left everything behind and decided to return to the past. Elise, if I hadn't been afraid of being criticized for saving you first, do you really think I would have chosen you over Helen? After he was gone, my in-laws placed all the blame on me. If Louise had saved Helen first, at least they would be happy now. Even my son rejected me. It's your fault Aunt Helen died. That's why Dad hates me. I wish you had died instead of her. Faced with everyone's insults, I made a decision. I would go back to the past too. This time, I would save myself. I wouldn't owe Louise anything. Chapter 1. The dizziness from the time machine slowly faded, leaving only the icy chill of the water soaking my body. I felt like I was about to die. Forcing my eyes open, I saw Louise standing in a small wooden boat, looking at me with absolute indifference. Our eyes met, but he didn't hesitate for a second, turned away and rowed toward Helen, who was trapped on the roof of a house. The powerful current almost dragged me under. I clung desperately to a floating log, struggling to swim toward safety. Just as I was about to reach solid ground, Louise's boat passed right by me. Helen, in a misstep, nearly fell into the water. To steady her, Louise let go of the oar, and the boat ended up colliding with me. The sharp pain in my abdomen almost made me lose my grip, but as if he hadn't seen anything, Louise anxiously helped Helen to shore. When I finally managed to drag myself out of the water, coughing violently, Louise, having already secured Helen's safety, approached me and said coldly, "Elise, you could have saved yourself. You stayed in the water on purpose to force me to rescue you first, didn't you? You made it so I couldn't save Helen." The iciness in his gaze made me shiver. He didn't know that I had also returned from the future. "Are you going to run and accuse me to my parents again? Say whatever you want about me, but if you dare to slander Helen, I won't forgive you even with her help." Pressing my aching abdomen, I lifted my head toward Louise. "Let's divorce." Louise looked momentarily surprised, then stood still for a beat before frowning impatiently. "I have more important things to do. I don't have time for your whims." "This isn't a whim," I said calmly. "I'm serious." In my past life, Louise had said that besides regretting not saving Helen first, he deeply regretted marrying me under family pressure. I didn't want history to repeat itself. This time, I would help him correct both mistakes. Louise didn't believe a word I said. His eyes grew colder and more impatient. "Now that my parents aren't here, you don't have to keep pretending," he snapped. "You just want to use divorce as an excuse to make them hate Helen even more. Stop with these useless tricks. Don't play with something as serious as divorce just to get attention. I'll take you to the hospital first." He shot me a warning glance, signaling me to stop causing trouble. The pain in my belly was getting worse. Just as I was about to take his hand to stand up, Helen ran over and shoved me aside. Clinging to Louise's arm, she cried, "Louise, Ben swallowed a lot of water trying to protect me. He's in bad shape, can you please take him to the vet?" Faced with Helen's desperate tears, Louise didn't hesitate for a second. He nodded immediately. Only when he looked back at me did he remember he had promised to take me to the hospital. Sensing his hesitation, Helen knelt in front of me, pleading, "Elise, you're not seriously hurt. Please let Louise take Ben to the vet first." I couldn't bear to lose him. Ben was the dog Louise and Helen had adopted together. Louise gave me a fleeting, guilty glance. "I'll find someone with a bike to take you to the hospital," he said. "After seeing the vet, I'll come for you," I replied calmly. "All right. Go." Louise looked surprised, but Helen urged him so insistently that he didn't think twice. He got into the Jeep and left with Helen and Ben. Once they were gone, I turned to look at the hem of my dress. Just as I suspected, it was soaked in blood. I made it to the hospital on my own, only for the doctor to tell me coldly that I had arrived too late. The baby couldn't be saved. Chapter 2. In my previous life, because Louise had saved me first, the child had been unharmed. After our son was born, Louise never once held him. Beyond sending money for expenses, he never cared about us. Even the gifts our son carefully made for him, Luis would throw away without a thought. I still remember my son tearfully asking me, "Why do other kids get birthday presents from their dads, but I don't even get a piece of candy from Luis?" Back then, I didn't understand until the day I overheard Luis telling him, "Don't call me Dad. I will never acknowledge you as my son." I watched my son break down in tears as Luis coldly took out a small lock of golden fur he had kept for years. "It's all your fault," he said. "While everyone was taking you to the hospital when you were sick, Ben got lost in the chaos. I not only failed to protect Helen, I lost Ben too. If I could go back, I'd do everything to protect Helen and Ben, even if it meant losing my own child." My thoughts returned to the present. I calmly wiped away my tears. From the moment I came back, I had already decided I would divorce Luis. I had never intended to keep this baby. I finished drafting the divorce papers in the hospital room and carefully tucked them away. Just as I was done, Luis returned carrying a bag full of the latest toys. "I saw they'd just arrived in the store," he said with a smile. "I was afraid they'd sell out quickly, so I bought some for our future child." Luis, with an eager smile, began showing me the toys one by one, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "How's Ben?" I asked. Luis's smile froze instantly. He cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable, and nodded. "The vet said he's fine. Please don't tell my parents anything about what happened today. I'm worried they'll misunderstand Helen again. If you help me keep it quiet, I promise I'll give you anything you ask for." So that was what it came down to. The toys weren't for our child, they were a bargaining chip to protect Helen. When I glanced down, I caught sight of a label on one of the toys. "For dogs only." In that moment, it felt as if something heavy pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. So the toys were actually for Ben. Expensive, imported luxury products. Luis truly spared no expense when it came to Helen. "Anything I want." I turned my head to hide the tears threatening to fall. Luis nodded without hesitation. I took out the divorce agreement, covering the written contents and leaving only the signature line visible. "Then sign here." "What's this?" "A small agreement," I replied lightly. "A promise that you'll never love anyone else." Luis had always seen me as childish. I used to do things like this, so he didn't suspect a thing. Without thinking twice, he took the pen and signed. Seeing his name on the paper brought me a strange sense of release. Luis had once been my savior. Now I was the one giving him back his freedom, so he could choose the path he truly wanted. Our families had been close friends for generations. Luis and I had known each other since we were young. In the beginning, my life was as peaceful and beautiful as his until the day my mother suddenly passed away and my father remarried. From that moment, I fell straight from heaven into hell. Under my stepmother's constant provocations, my father stopped giving me any money to live on, not even for basic necessities. At school, my classmates mocked me for wearing old, tattered men's clothes. When I had nowhere left to hide my shame, it was Luis who stepped in, shielding me from the red ink they threw and harshly scolding those who humiliated me. He even said that he too wore hand-me-downs and that there was nothing to be ashamed of. That day, the dignity I thought I had lost was picked up by Luis, and our bond grew even closer. Later, when my stepmother gave birth to a son, she and my father, unwilling to take care of 2 children, pushed me into a lake. I was about to drown when Luis dove in to save me. After my father and stepmother were arrested, Luis took me into his home and begged his parents to pay for my education, so I wouldn't be left destitute. Chapter 3. Luis had pulled me out of the abyss again and again, making me believe our connection was different from everyone else's. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I realized it far too late. Luckily, now I had the chance to choose again. Mom and Dad made your favorite food. They haven't seen you in a long time. Let's have dinner with them. But just as we reached the door, one of Helen's friends hurried over and whispered something to Luis. Helen's so shaken from what happened today that she doesn't even dare to use water. She can't cook. I'm going to her place to make her dinner. After Luis left, I stayed and had dinner with his parents. We had just finished eating and were about to leave when my mother-in-law came in with a dark expression. Luis went to see Helen again, didn't he? Seeing that I wasn't surprised, She set the beans she had brought down on the table with a thud. Didn't you say he was busy with work? Well, while I was picking beans at your aunt's place, I overheard Helen bragging in the yard that Luis was cooking her dinner. She huffed. I don't understand what he sees in that Helen to be so obsessed with her. If I didn't fear that Luis might do something reckless, I would have already told him Helen was married before. I just don't want him getting into trouble at work. I remained calm. I had known that secret for a long time, thanks to my in-laws. Helen had hidden her past well, if not for an accident, even they wouldn't have found out. Her husband had abused her, and Helen had fled to the city to escape. Luis's parents never told him, afraid that if he found out, he would confront the ex-husband, get into trouble, and be fired. It was only after I married Luis that I learned the whole truth. That was why, in my past life, I had never considered divorce. But in this life, I chose to let go. Whatever Luis decided to do would be his choice. I no longer wanted to be trapped in that toxic love. Elise, my mother-in-law, sighed. We know you've suffered. When we insisted you marry Luis, it was because we truly believed his feelings for you were special, but now, I looked at her calmly and replied with a faint smile. Luis helped me in the past probably because he has a good heart, not because he loved me. We were the ones who misinterpreted his intentions and interfered in his life. If being together only brings us unhappiness, it's better to separate sooner rather than later. Separate? My in-laws exclaimed in shock. Yes, I nodded. Luis has already signed the divorce papers I prepared. All that's left is to submit them and wait for approval, so it becomes official. But I ask that you please don't mention it to Luis yet. I don't want him to sacrifice his true will out of a sense of obligation. Thinking of our 7 years of marriage, where we were little more than polite strangers under the same roof, filled me with a painful, inevitable ache. That night, just as I was about to sleep, my bedroom door was violently kicked open. I looked up and saw fury blazing in Luis's eyes. Elise, I knew you went running to cry to my parents. You won't stop until Helen leaves me, will you? Chapter 4. If you hadn't gone to complain, my parents wouldn't have gone to find Helen, and Ben wouldn't have gone missing in the middle of their argument. Ben had gone missing? Panic surged through me instantly. Could I really not change this fate? Think carefully, Elise, Luis snapped. You know exactly how it feels to lose a child. Helen's pain over Ben is no different. Can you stop being selfish for once? This all started because of you. You have to make it up to her. If we don't find Ben, then you'd better be prepared to lose your baby too. His words pierced my heart like knives. No one understood better than I did what it meant to lose a child, but Luis still didn't know that we had already lost ours. I'll find Ben, I said, walking out of the room. Behind me, I heard Luis's cold laugh. Stop pretending to be noble. Finding him is the least you can do. Don't think it will earn you my forgiveness. I searched around Helen's house, where the lights were still on. Through the window, 2 silhouettes clung to each other in a tight embrace. The cold was biting, and my body, already weakened from the miscarriage, was reaching its limit. After more than an hour of searching, my vision blurred, but I refused to give up. I had to find Ben only, then would I be free of any debt to Luis. Only then could we part ways owing each other nothing. At dawn, I finally found Ben tied up in an abandoned yard, shivering on the cold stone tiles. With great effort, I brought him back. When I arrived, I saw Luis gently wiping away Helen's tears.
Ben.
Helen, look. Helen ran to us and hugged Ben tightly. When Luis seemed about to approach me to say something, Helen stepped forward first, crying, Luis, Ben seems to have caught a cold. They say sick dogs can be in great danger. Please take him to the vet. I couldn't bear to lose him. Luis hesitated for a moment when he saw me pale and swaying. Sensing his hesitation, I steadied myself against the wall. I'm fine, I murmured. Take them to the vet first. Luis and Helen left, and as their figures disappeared, darkness clouded my vision, and I collapsed to the ground. When I woke up in the hospital, Luis was sitting beside my bed, his face full of concern. Why didn't you say you were feeling unwell? Did you want my parents to find out and make a scene about Helen? From his reaction, it seemed he still didn't know about the loss of the baby. I exhaled in relief. I went too far last night, Luis said, lowering his voice slightly. But I was really worried Helen might do something reckless over Ben. I had no choice but to stay with her. Sorry. At his apology, I let out a small laugh. Luis looked at me in confusion, as if asking why. You've always been soft-hearted, I said calmly. When we were kids, you helped me only because you pitied me, right? I bet you regret it now. If you hadn't helped me back then, you wouldn't have ended up marrying me. Luis was silent for a few seconds before slowly shaking his head. I've never regretted anything I've done. You really do overthink. I bought you your favorite shredded beef noodles. Come on, eat a little. He opened the takeout box, and the delicious aroma filled the room. Just as I reached for the chopsticks, Helen walked into the hospital room. Luis, my stomach hurts so much I think I'm starving. Could you give me the noodles? Chapter 5. At that moment, my stomach growled in protest. But without hesitation, Luis handed the noodles to Helen and explained to me, Helen has stomach problems. Could you switch meals with her just this once? Before I could respond, Helen added with a feigned look of surprise, Oh, but I dropped my food on the floor earlier. The floor isn't that dirty, though. If Elise doesn't mind, I could have hers. Luis turned to me, visibly uncomfortable. Elise, I'll bring you something else later, he began, but Helen quickly cut him off. Luis, the doctor said I need a blood test. Will you come with me? I faint when I see blood. That afternoon, Luis returned to the hospital. Seeing the empty takeout box on the table, he looked at me with a hint of guilt. I forgot to bring you food, but at least you've eaten. Then, with a serious tone, he added, I promise I won't divorce you. I just ask that you stop causing trouble for Helen. A bitter taste spread through my heart, but I said nothing. Perhaps out of guilt, Luis tried to make small talk. The doctor says the first 3 months are critical. From now on, I'll come back every night to cook for you. What do you think, boy or girl? Do you really look forward to this baby? Of course. Babies are a miracle. The tenderness in his eyes as he said it took my breath away. So he really did want to have a child, and yet he would end up hating that same child for 7 years. At that moment, a nurse rushed in. Who's Luis? Helen is your relative, right? She just ran up to the hospital roof. She seems very unstable. Before the nurse could finish, Luis had already vanished from the room. I looked at the 4-needle I had accidentally pulled out and let out a bitter laugh. As I walked down the corridor, I crossed paths with Luis carrying Helen in his arms. When he saw me, his eyes filled with fury and contempt. Elise, how dare you slander Helen by saying she was married? Don't you know that could ruin her life forever? If you can say that about Helen, I replied calmly, then I can say that the baby I'm carrying isn't yours. Luis looked at my bleeding hand, and though something seemed to flicker in his expression, there wasn't the slightest sign of remorse. My attending doctor tried to intervene, but Luis ignored him and walked away with Helen in his arms. In that moment, I understood everything. It was time to leave. After completing the discharge procedures, I gathered my things and left quietly. After taking Helen home and calming her down, Luis remembered he had to return to the hospital for me. There, he ran into my attending doctor. When he learned I had already been discharged, his brow furrowed in annoyance. Running around while pregnant, that's absolutely irresponsible. Pregnant? The doctor raised an eyebrow. Didn't you know? On the day of the flood, Elise took a blow to the abdomen. She arrived at the hospital far too late. The baby didn't survive. Chapter 6. Impossible. Luis shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. He stared at the doctor, repeating impossible over and over, his whole body trembling in fear. The doctor handed him my medical file. Read it for yourself. I have no reason to lie to you. Luis flipped through the documents with shaking hands, his eyes bloodshot, nearly crushing the papers in his grip. It can't be, this isn't real, he muttered in a shattered voice. The doctor seemed about to say more, but Luis had already bolted from the hospital like a madman. He went home, but when he didn't find me there, he rushed to his parents' house. Is Elise here? I need to talk to her. His parents seemed ready to answer, but when they saw the medical file in his hands, their faces filled with deep disappointment. Now we understand everything, his father said gravely. Now we know why Elise insisted on divorcing you. Divorce? Luis asked, growing more agitated. When did I ever say I wanted to divorce her? Elise said you had already signed the divorce papers. She gave them to your superior the same day she came to dinner. We tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't change her mind. Now, everything makes sense. Tell us what exactly happened that day. Luis's mother was already crying, trembling with anger. Luis froze, his voice barely a whisper. Didn't Elise tell you what happened? Of course not, his mother replied bitterly. She told us you were busy with work. I only found out the truth because, passing by your aunt's house, I overheard Helen bragging in the yard that you were cooking her dinner. Just then, the aunt came in and nodded. It's true. Helen even said you were planning to divorce Elise, so you could marry her. Luis felt the blood drain from his face. In that instant, everything clicked. Helen had said those things on purpose.
Why? What did she gain from that?
Luis's world crumbled. For the first time, he began to see that Helen might not be as innocent as he had always believed. His father spoke harshly. What did she gain? Isn't it obvious? She wanted to separate you from Elise, so she could have you for herself. Luis shook his head, confused. But if she wanted to marry me, she could have done it before. Why go through all this now? His mother's face was twisted with pain and anger. Because back then, she thought she had hooked a wealthy man from the city. She looked down on you. But later she found out that man was a fraud, a mere gambler. She opened an envelope they had received and pulled out a video. In the footage, Helen, who had always acted so modest and demure in front of Luis, wore a low-cut, provocative wedding dress, kissing a vulgar man passionately. Around them, several drunken men laughed and joked. Bro, what a woman you've got. Lucky guy. Didn't she have some boyfriend who loved her before? Helen rolled her eyes with disdain. Boyfriend? Please. He was just a poor fool. If it hadn't been for that orphan girl following him around everywhere, I wouldn't have even bothered to look at Luis. Luis watched the video over and over, grinding his teeth so hard it was a wonder they didn't break. He had always believed Helen left him because of pressure from her parents to protect Elise. That was the story Helen had told him. Only now did he finally realize how wrong he had been. The true victim had never been Helen, it was Elise, the woman he had hurt again and again. Chapter 7. We were always afraid that if you learned the truth, you'd try to take revenge for Helen and confront that man. That's why we never dared tell you she had been married, his parents said. We thought that after you got married, you'd forget about Helen. We never imagined she'd come looking for you again, let alone that you defend her over and over, hurting Elise in the process. Do you really think Elise owes you something just because you did a few things for her? You have no idea everything she's done for you. Every time you abandoned your job and your family for Helen, it was Elise who cleaned up the mess. She even said you helped her out of kindness and that she shouldn't use your goodwill to hold on to you, so she decided to give you back the freedom to choose your own marriage. Hearing those words, Luis closed his eyes in agony as tears silently slid down his face. How had they ended up here?
He had spent 7 years with Elise.
They had a beautiful child. No could still fix this. I'm going to find Elise and bring her back. Luis searched every place he thought I might be, but there was no sign of me. The night was freezing, and as he clutched his coat tightly around him, he remembered me searching desperately for Ben in the cold right after losing our child. How had I survived that night? While remorse ate away at him, he overheard his aunt speaking to someone. Who knows what she was thinking? I saw with my own eyes how she tied that yellow dog in the abandoned yard. I thought if she didn't want to keep it, I could take it to guard my house, but she looked at me with such hatred it gave me chills. Hearing that, Luis ran over. Aunt, who are you talking about? Seeing him, the woman's face shifted uncomfortably, and she forced a smile. I'm not speaking badly about Helen, just that before she could finish, Luis cut her off desperately. Are you saying it was Helen who tied the dog in the abandoned yard? She nodded, puzzled. Luis stepped back, feeling hollow, as if all his strength had been drained. How could he have been so blind? For years, he had believed Helen was pure and innocent, even abandoning everything to go back in time to save her.
No.
He could still make it right. When he finally found me, I was focused on preparing for my university entrance exams. His voice trembled with emotion as he pulled me into a tight embrace. Elise, come back to me, let's build a real life together. I pushed him away firmly and handed him the already approved divorce papers. The divorce certificate will be issued any time now. We're no longer husband and wife. You're free now. You can pursue the love and life you truly want. I'm tired. I don't want us trapped in this endless pain any longer. Thank you for what you once did for me. When I finished speaking, an indescribable pain filled Luis's face. He looked at me pleadingly, trembling, and in that moment I saw the same Luis who, in my past life, had wasted away in unrequited love for Helen. All those painful memories paraded through my mind, and I knew I never wanted to live through them again. Luis, I said softly but firmly, what we had is over. Chapter 8. The day I went for my medical checkup, Luis was already waiting outside the hospital early in the morning. When the doctor told him my body was fine and that I only needed rest to fully recover, his face finally showed some relief. But as soon as he remembered the lost baby, guilt clouded his expression again. Seeing his face, I tried to console him. Maybe it's for the best, I said gently. This way, our baby can be born one day into a truly happy home. Luis's eyes trembled. He was about to say something when Helen suddenly appeared, throwing herself into his arms with sobs. I finally found you, Luis. You have to help me. Lately I've felt like someone's been following me. Could you stay with me for a while? Helen had been feeling insecure since Luis stopped visiting her, but she had first decided to attend a few high society parties with her friends. That was, until after leaving one of those parties, she ran into her so-called rich husband, nothing more than a petty gambler. Knowing he still had evidence against her, Helen had no choice but to seek out Luis. While she was still weighing whether or not marrying him would benefit her, she didn't notice that Luis's eyes now held nothing but disgust. That was, until he pushed her away.
Luis?
Helen froze, then turned to me with tears. Elise, you must have misunderstood. Luis and I haven't done anything improper. If you want to blame someone, blame me, but not Luis, all right? In the past, Luis would have stepped in to defend Helen. But this time, he looked at her coldly. Is someone really following you, or is it your husband who's come back? How long were you planning to deceive me? Did you feel proud watching me hurt Elise because of you? I've already found a new home for Ben. You won't be using him as a tool anymore. If Elise hadn't found him, how long were you going to leave him chained up in that abandoned yard? Helen lowered her head, unable to hide the panic in her eyes. She quickly tried to compose herself, crying as she turned to me. Elise, I know you hate it when Luis helps me. Say whatever you want to me, but please don't take Ben away. She was trying her usual tactics, but this time, they didn't work. Luis took out the evidence, the wedding images and the recordings in which she incriminated me. When Helen saw the video, the color drained from her face. During her wedding to the supposed millionaire, believing she had won, she had been blatantly flirtatious and provocative, never imagining that the man was nothing but a fraud. Just as Helen was thinking of how to explain herself, a group of men suddenly appeared and surrounded her. Helen, I finally found you. You want to leave? Give me back all the money you stole from me first. I was a fool to fall for such a fake woman. Did you use my money to keep your lover? Now you pretend to be pure? Why don't you tell everyone how liberal you really were when you were with me? Chapter 9. Helen's face flushed red with rage. She tore off her mask of sweetness and screamed, How dare you come asking me for money? You promised me $30,000 after we got married, and even if you sold everything you owned, you couldn't come close to that. You think I married you for love? With that disgusting face of yours? That money is the least I deserve. I'll never give it back. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. The so-called millionaire, weakened by years of vice, was no match for Helen. Seeing the chaos, Luis immediately stepped in to shield me, pulling me behind him and leading me away. After we'd gone far enough, as we walked down the streets we had once taken to and from school, Luis spoke with melancholy. When we were kids, we used to walk down this street every day. Now I'd give anything to go back to that time. Are human beings simply too greedy? Then he looked at me with deep sadness. If I told you that during the flood I saved you first instead of Helen, and then traveled back in time to try to fix my mistakes, would you believe me? Luis told me what he had experienced in his previous life. Ironically, from his perspective, everything seemed completely different from how I remembered it. Even now, he still didn't understand how deeply his indifference had hurt me. "I never wanted to hurt you or the baby," Luis said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "But every time I looked at you both, I couldn't help thinking of Helen dead in the flood and Ben lost. It was constant torture. Those years were terrible for me. Every day, I fought with myself, and in the process, I ended up ignoring your feelings. Since we were children, I promised myself I would always protect you, that I would never let you get hurt. And in the end, I was the one who hurt you the most. I thought if I used the time machine to go back and save Helen, everything would change. I believed that once that was resolved, we could be together without resentment. But why did it turn out like this? This time, I managed to save her, but I lost you. If I had known this would be the ending, I swear I would never have gone back." Luis let out a bitter, self-mocking smile. "You must think I'm talking nonsense," he murmured. I looked at him and smiled softly. Of course I didn't think he was joking, because I had lived it too. After he disappeared into the time machine, the days that followed were hell for me. The disappointment and blame in my in-laws' eyes. The coldness and rejection of my own son, so much like Luis. It crushed me. It suffocated me. When I decided to go back in time, I clearly saw the yearning in their eyes. They all hoped that this time, the ending would be different. So I decided to grant their wish and free myself, too. "People always imagine that the road they didn't take is the most beautiful one," I said quietly. "But in the end, when they actually walk it, they find it ends in regret as well. Now Helen is fine. You're free from the marriage your parents forced on you. For me, this is already the best possible ending." Luis looked at me in desperation, tears falling to the ground. "No," he murmured through sobs. "This isn't what I truly wanted." The love he had waited for all those years shone in his eyes, but now, faced with reality, he knew it was far too late. "Luis," I said softly, "don't come looking for me again." Luis stood frozen, watching as I turned and walked away without the slightest hesitation. Chapter 10. The next 7 years of my life were nothing like the ones I had lived before. I lived an entirely new life. When work brought me back to that all-too-familiar city, I realized that everything that had happened felt like a distant dream, growing fainter with time. If I hadn't come back to change the ending, Luis might have tried to use the time machine again. At his parents' persistent request, I agreed to visit Luis's house. When he saw me, his eyes filled with astonishment, panic, longing, a tangle of emotions twisting his features. It was from his parents that I learned that shortly after I left, Luis had been fired for personal conduct issues. After a long silence, Luis finally spoke, his voice tight. "Looks like you've done well these past years." I smiled faintly. Yes, both my career and my personal life had gone well. After hesitating for a moment, Luis looked at me with a mix of caution and hope. "You never dated anyone again, is it?" Because he didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. "It's true," I said calmly. "I never dated anyone again. And I have no intention of looking for someone. But that has nothing to do with you. When I was a child, I watched my father remarry hastily after my mother's death. Since then, I've understood that love isn't everything. Being alone is fine. For Luis, once, I broke that rule, but I never would again." The light in Luis's eyes gradually faded. He lowered his gaze, trying to hide his tears. Before we married, I told him, if our home isn't going to be warm, I'd rather not have one. And in the end, Luis had left me alone and frozen for 7 whole years. Talking with his parents, I also learned that Helen hadn't met a good fate either. She refused to work, spending her days dreaming of finding another rich man. After burning through all the money she had gotten from her fake husband, she lived off the charity of various men. But she never thought that was a problem. She actually enjoyed it. Until recently. The last man she got involved with was already married. When his wife and family stormed into Helen's home, they beat the man until he was crippled and disfigured Helen's face. With no other option, Helen went back to the fake millionaire. But he was buried in debt, and together they spent their days hiding from creditors. Each time they were found, they were brutally beaten. Hearing all this, I couldn't help but feel a strange melancholy. Last time, Helen had died when Luis loved her most, becoming forever his unattainable first love. This time, Luis had managed to save Helen to watch her slowly rot before his eyes. After his parents left, Luis sat in silence, as if wanting to say something, but unable to. At last, he asked the question that had been tormenting him. "I never understood why you changed so much. You traveled in the time machine too, didn't you?"
I didn't deny it.
There was nothing to hide. Hearing my answer, Luis let out a bitter laugh. "I knew it. What have I done? Why did I come back? I really regret it, Elise. If neither of us had returned, maybe the ending would have been different. If this time I had saved you first, maybe I wouldn't have lost you." Seeing the anguish in his expression, I sighed with sadness. "There's no such thing as what might have been, Luis. And even if there were, my feelings would still be the same. Look ahead, Luis. We've been trapped in the past for far too long." The day the time machine was operational again, Luis couldn't wait to travel back. This time, he swore he would choose Elise. He swore he would never hurt her again. But when he returned, he discovered that the outcome never changed. 7 years, then another 7 over and over. Luis traveled back only to relive again and again the pain of losing Elise. And still, he never gave up. Because only by returning to that fleeting moment when they were still together could he find the strength to endure the endless years. Luis watched the workers in silence, and once more, he stepped into the time machine.